I guess give me a question, because if you
Yeah, well, I think it's just, I always think about like, okay, so even like we're in this really interesting neighborhood, right, of Toronto, and what would you call this neighborhood? How would you describe it and what it feels to be in this neighborhood?
uh well, I think the neighborhood is called like the exhibition grounds, I believe, but I think for me it's really like peaceful. I like being able to like escape the noise of like downtown and just kind of like other parts of the city. And for me, obviously, working in here, it's really good to just remove myself from the noise and focus on what I'm doing. So yeah, I think like there's definitely a relationship to the space and and I guess like my work.
And what is your work? Who are you and what is your work?
So I'm Spencer Badu. I run a unisex brand uh, that's named after myself. Yeah, I was born in Brampton, live in Toronto now. Parents are from Ghana, so West African descent. And for me, everything is about really trying to build a uniform that's somewhat modern and that kind of appeals to, I would say, me and my peers, and I think a lot of people that probably relate to us. So people that kind of, I guess you can say, don't really subscribe to a specific lifestyle or way of living. Um, and then yeah, the clothes are, in a way, I guess you can say it's a personal universe in a way, and there's a lot of references from my culture or things that I gravitate to, whether when I was younger or now. So it's a mixture of things, but ultimately I try to take all of those and create something that's just like minimal and clean. And obviously, if you get the cues, whether it's in the design or the photography, it's definitely something that I try to like, So yeah.
And you end up in this neighborhood in your business because why? Why are you in this neighborhood doing your
Oh
business?
yeah. Well, I'm in this neighborhood because of the Toronto Fashion Incubator. So this is where I make and design everything. So I guess yeah, that's the only reason why I'm here. but yeah, um, but yeah. So to answer your question, I'm in this neighborhood because of the studio space. Yeah.
And any influences, any sort of other peers that you'd say the work that you do, the way you design, the way you think of your design, are any inspirations?
Not really. I think being when I was younger, obviously I looked at every single designer, especially when I was in school. That was like really. So I actually went to school for women's wear. So for me, like fit and design was really important. So I was looking at any and everyone, the Dior's of the world, the Balenciagas, just kind of like the quintessential, like, kind of like historic designers. And then obviously you get exposed to more like new world designers, more like modern designers. But I think for me, after the pandemic, I really realized that prior to the pandemic, I was trying to like construct a story. And at times it just wasn't making sense for me. And then I just realized like I have to tell my own story, so I'm trying to be more personal with my work, opposed to being super like referential to like other people or trying to build like a abstract world that doesn't really like resonate with people. So I think for me, the most important part is that it resonates with me, and then hopefully it resonates with other people that have similar ways of thinking or sensibilities or values. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like where my head's at in terms of like inspiration and influence. But a lot of it comes from like music, movies, culture. Just really kind of like trying to juxtapose and dissect like the different elements within my life. Whether it's like being born in Canada but having like parents of African descent, and kind of jumbling it all together, right?
Right,
So
right.
yeah.
And then the other thing I'm struck by is the unisex nature of your clothing, right?
Yeah.
And which just fits right now. I mean, even though you're ahead of the game,
Yeah.
frankly, because when
Yeah,
I
yeah.
discovered, your work years ago, the terms non-binary wasn't even being used.
Exactly.
And unisex was kind of this sort of, esoteric thing that a few people did, but you were so clear about that. Like,
Exactly.
I'm curious about that for you. So why you were
Yeah,
so ahead of the
so-
game with that?
So for me, I think prior to that, like prior to where we are now, a lot of fashion was very specific to gender. So you had like women's wear, which was like flowy and like dresses, and then you had like menswear, which was like very like sartorialist, where it was like suits. Milan was like a big thing, and for me, it didn't really make sense seeing like men going to women's shows and like looking at dresses and seeing nothing that they couldn't purchase or buy. So I kind of wanted to create something that I guess like in a way whoever saw the clothes, they can walk away with something. Um, and yeah, so ultimately it was really about like creating a new type of uniform, and also, like I said, like being in Canada, a lot of schools are mainly geared towards women's wear,
Right.
being that like women's wear is more of like a market for the like Canadian market. So I was trained in women's wear, but I ultimately want to make things for myself. So there's a bit of a balance of like learning women's wear techniques and making things for women, but also want to make things for myself. So I kind of take that like those two, aspects and just kind of like jumble it all together. But yeah, I think obviously prior to where we are now, like that wasn't really a thing.
Right.
But also I don't think like people were as, I guess you can say, developed as where we are now. So I think it's just part of it's all part of the puzzle or the process. But yeah, here we are now, and I think especially for me now, just it's really important that I'm authentic about that approach in terms of like I try not to be super like loud or make like specific statements on gender or like being political at all. I just try to like say it all with the clothes, and obviously once the people wear it, it kind of speaks for itself, right? So
Because I think of two other designers. Locally, there's Luma Strano. Do you know Luma Strano?
No,
Of
I
Luma
don't,
Strano?
no.
So Luma Strano sort of leans towards the more feminine presentation
Okay.
of the clothing. But I think the same messaging, right?
Yeah,
about,
of course.
and it's interesting because I think what both of you are doing in a way at the different ends is you're really identifying with where you land in terms of your comfort with,
Exactly.
however you want to express yourself
Yeah.
without a limitation of what you wear. It's simply, oh, that looks good, it fits me. I mean, even I had the lessons recently where I walked into a store, say anything for men, and the response would be, well, if it fits you.
if it fits you,
If it fits
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
and
yeah.
you look good in it and you
Yeah.
like it, we don't really have those limitations, which I think, and that's even in sort of the mainstream stores. People are starting to say that now
Yeah, I
because they're
think it's
recognizing
more,
that, right?
It's more politically correct to not be very specific about gender, and I think now that it's like it's part of the culture now, right?
Right.
It's of every day to be more, just to be more like inclusive and like more open-minded about gender. Like for me, my stance on gender is really, or my proposal of everything is really based on one of curiosity,
Right.
opposed to making like general statements about, specifically about one's identity. So
Right.
I think the curiosity leads me to where I'm at with the garments. So
Yeah, and it's interesting because the other person, I think, because Lumo also uses a lot more color
yeah,
and fabric and and sort of like a lot more volume, right?
Volume,
Whereas
yeah,
you're a little bit more lean,
Yeah.
even though your pants are fairly voluminous,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, a lot of minimal aspects, and I think that's a lot of like where somewhat of my references come from, especially in terms of like design philosophy, a lot of like minimalism, brutalism. But I think to the topic of telling more of a personal story, I'm looking more at like my heritage and trying to tap into like color and the use of color, because I really believe that like being African, like what I've learned is that like color is more intentional.
Right.
It's not just like I feel like wearing red today, so I'm gonna wear red. There's a reason why you wear certain colors and what that represents. So I'm trying to use that, whether if I'm starting a collection the way I feel or if I'm trying to get a message across,
Right.
opposed to just kind of saying what's the trend today and just using that to make or create a collection. Like if I was to go to Ghana and wear all black, they would ask
Yeah.
me if I was going to a funeral, right? So, but obviously that's not the case.
So
here,
how are you feeling? Like, what's
exactly.
up, right?
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think just finding that like balance of just trying to tell a personal story in line with like with the world that I've already created for myself.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I'm struck by when your orange is a really
Yeah.
strong. Like when
Yeah.
you use color too,
Yeah.
you seem, as you said, intentional. Like it's really
Yeah.
powerful colors. It's not
Yeah.
like even muted or
Yeah.
washed out.
Exactly.
It's almost like you're always making just like how the dark colors you use are really
Yeah.
also striking the cut
Yeah.
and the silhouette of it.
Yeah.
I see that you do it with color as well. Even when you
Yeah.
do color, you do it in a very
Absolutely.
strong way. a
Yeah, I
bold
try
way,
to
right?
be more intentional about it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the only other designer I'm thinking of is Telfar, which you.
Yeah, of course,
you know.
amazing designer.
Do you see any parallels? Because I tend to kind of look at you and say,
I guess it's up to the audience to say that.
Right.
I think Telfar is like he's a legend in his own right. I think a lot of people don't know that he's been doing this for a long time, and he was doing unisex before any of us was doing it, and like I think now he's kind of in his glory, which is amazing. But yeah, I think the parallels could be just in like the way of thinking, right? The
Yeah.
way of, in terms of um, gender, in terms of accessibility, in terms of community. I think there's a lot of, those kind of, I guess you can say, those themes or those kind of pillars within the brand. But for sure, I think like I would be lying if I said I wasn't inspired by what he's doing. I think like especially for me on a business level, like it's really motivating to see an independent black designer that's like kind of playing the fashion game in his own way, right? So, but yeah.
And also with Liberian heritage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah,
From
that
the continent
too. Yeah,
directly.
exactly. So I think for me, it's super motivating to see anyone that looks like me in a higher, in a, I guess you can say, a high level of design, or just a high level of praise, or just getting the praise that they deserve. I think for me, it's super motivating as a young designer. I look at that and I say to myself that it's possible. So
yeah. And I can't, as a designer, I mean, I always think of the other Ghanaians, like Oswald.
Of course.
And then currently Virgil.
Yeah, exactly. Virgil. And I think Oswald for sure, like, I think when I start to get into like color, it's like he's definitely someone to look at, because I think his use of color as well is very, very intentional and very, in a way, very captivating. And I think who knows, if one day I can sit down with him, I'd be interested to see kind of like his philosophy for his use of color. I think it's sublime for sure.
Well, it's interesting how the Nigerians tend to sort of do those kind of confabs. So hopefully the Ghanaians will kind of do some confabs, and you're in there, you're at that table, to engage.
Course, yeah.
And the only thing I thought about Telfar was because I really like your bags with the see-through. Very distinct, a unique kind of signature thing.
Absolutely,
and it made me think, okay, this bag looks like it could get up there if you. I don't know if that's you're thinking of that or.
Yeah. Well, I think a bag is something that traditionally was used by fashion houses to kind of, I guess, show some kind of I guess exclusivity or luxury. And I think for me and the generation that I live in, that's not really the case anymore.
Yeah.
It could be more symbols of like community, or just something that is more useful and more everyday, instead of like something you wear to like a cocktail party. But yeah, I thought it was like really important to start to spread the language and translate that into different product lines and categories. And I thought the bag was like the perfect thing for that. So we kind of wanted to play within the same things or themes that we've been playing with, whether it's like one has to be unisex, two has to be functional. I wanted it to be something that could be used in multiple ways, just kind of like leaning on more of like a technical aspect, because I find a lot of bags, yes, you have technical aspects in terms of like the quintessential like zippers and straps, but like nothing that you can kind of like turn something into something else or use something multiple ways. And I think it also just gives the wearer like a bang for their buck, right? Like you can wear it at night in a specific way, you can wear it during the day, you can take it to the beach, you can take it apart, you can take one and give one to your partner. There's just like so many different elements of it. And I kind of wanted to like kind of play around with like translating our language and our codes into different objects. So I'm excited to get into other things, whether it's like shoes and other accessories. But yeah, I think bags are definitely the it thing right now. And I think they always will be, for sure.
And I like how you just described that, unisex, functional, multiplex, multiple ways of using it, and technical.
Exactly, 100%.
That could be the 4 words for your
yeah,
100%.
That's like that's definitely the foundation of everything we do. One could be used by multiple genders or multiple people, and then I think like beyond the design, I think like I try to lean into my technical like teaching and knowledge, just to like really bring it out, to kind of like set myself apart and just kind of like give people a different experience, because I think that's really what's important right now, especially in a market where there's just so many other designers. It's like, how can I set myself apart? And I think kind of like having that kind of like technical aspect without being like too like futuristic, or just like where like people can still translate these things into their wardrobe, So
And so a couple last questions, and thank you for indulging me for
Yeah,
so
no worries,
long.
all good.
A couple last questions
Yeah.
is, let's sell some products. So how would you describe what you're wearing? Because this is from your collection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that we created recently. It's like a capsule collection. So we wanted to create something that was a bit more like wearable, and things that kind of like were more like everyday pieces. So this is a silhouette of our t-shirt, so it's more of like a wider cut.
Right.
Initially we had like more of a fitted standard t-shirt that kind of like referred to like a uniform, or like I don't know, if you work at FedEx, you get like a FedEx t-shirt. So it was kind of that reference in terms of fit. But we kind of wanted to make something that was a bit more bigger, more loose, more relaxed. And I think there was like a lot of feedback in terms of like this fit, because a lot of the other things, like people felt like if you didn't have like the perfect body, obviously like they felt like you couldn't wear it. And yeah, just kind of like tapping into inclusivity and all those kind of like different things. So
And the logo is?
another thing is like graphic language. So this is a hand. It's a reference from like a techno album from Jeff Mills. So that's another thing that we lean into, is just kind of like music and culture. And then these are just kind of like our standard track pants with the cargo pocket, our branded zipper. The line is a motif that you see in our logo, but it's something that we try to, more than just like a line, it's about, for me at least, like going in the same direction, singular ideas, one instead of multiple, you know what I mean? And then the back of the shirt
Wow.
has
Great.
graphics, so playing on to music. The graphic, it says SPB, but from
Sorry.
like, depending on like how you look at it, it can also say BPM.
Right.
So it's kind of like the play on the words or whatever. And then there's like a side A and a side B graphic, just kind of like playing to like a record label, like an actual record.
Yeah.
So you have the A side and the B side. So yeah, just kind of like being more personal with our references and kind of taking more of our like these things that we naturally gravitate to and putting it within the design language. So we're starting to do a lot more graphic things. Like initially we didn't really do a lot of graphical stuff, but we're seeing that like it's an easier way for us to translate these ideas, and also for the consumer, they're seeming to like, you know, the graphic language and just having graphics. I'm more of a minimal, understated person, but you know, it's kind of, you just got to find the balance for sure. Yeah.
And I like the fabric of the pants, actually. I was just thinking what kind of fabric it is.
Yeah, it's,
Which doesn't translate as well as on the second. I was like, oh, they're blind.
Yeah,
But
no,
then when I
this
see it in
is,
person, love it.
It's like a poly fleece, and the back has like a fleece, obviously. This was something that we released during the winter. We do have like more of like a straight leg sweatpant.
Right.
But I just like these so much that I wear them. But obviously on hot days, it's probably not the best. Like when it gets super hot, it's probably not the best pants to wear, but for sure.
Style, man,
Yeah,
style.
Exactly.
And I noticed that your number is still Alberta. What's the Alberta connection?
Yeah, so that's actually where I went to school. I have family there, and like when I moved here, I just didn't care to change the number, I guess. So, yeah.
That's a signature move as well. You know?
Exactly.
You reach a Toronto brother from a Calgary number.
Yeah, exactly. So I think with obviously Canada-wide being free, I just didn't have no incentive, and I had already started the business and I already had the number assigned to the business, so it was just easier to keep it opposed to just going through the process of changing it up. So, yeah.
So my last question is just, where next, and what's your message to anyone else? Well, let me just ask you first, where next? Where are you heading next? What's next?
Honestly, who knows? I think like sometimes I'm surprised that like, you know, we're still going and we made it this far. I think for us it's just really, I think the next thing is just like continue to double down on the aesthetic that we created and try to just build it out more. So it's just more, I would say, like actualized. And then in terms of like where we're going geographically, I'd love to just expand the brand globally. So ideally like Asia, Africa, you know, all those kind of different places. Europe would be amazing, but I feel like we're well on our way. It's just, I feel like as long as obviously we work on what's the important thing, which is the clothing.
Yeah.
Hopefully everything else falls into place. So I feel like as long as we're doing our job, we'll continue to grow. So I would say geographically, I want to go global, or we are going to go global. And then I think you had a question about, was it going to be about?
Yeah, the next one was a sort of, what's the message to anybody else trying to do what you're doing, you know, in terms of lessons you've learned? And
yeah, I would say lesson number one and big lesson is like take your time.
Right.
These things take time, and like there's really no rush. I would say take your time and really focus on yourself. I think those are like the two things that I've taken from my career. Like when you let go of ego and you really just focus on yourself and what you want to do, and not really be like intimidated or kind of like unmotivated by other people's success. You know, celebrate other people's success and take your time. Really build out something that, you know, especially if you want to do this for a long time, it's really about building something that you're going to be proud of, you know, in the next 5 to 10 years and so on, right? So I would say take your time and really focus on yourself and build something out that's like true to yourself. I think authenticity is like, as much as people like overuse that word, I think it's about being authentic and just really doubling down on like who you are as a person and kind of bringing out all those kind of sensibilities, and hopefully people relate to that, and then you're able to like build a business. Every designer doesn't tell a personal story,
Right.
but for whatever you do, I think it's really about being honest about that and coming from like a pure place. So
And very lastly is, so as a black man doing this, right?
Yeah.
Any thoughts for young black folks who are thinking about this? Because, you know, now we're in a time of, you know, Black Lives Matter, thinking about black businesses,
Yeah, exactly.
all the support's coming up, but people are just thinking about that and
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about that. And then other people might have been hesitant, or, you know, or even now are in there kind of going, oh man, it's like,
Yeah.
not so easy. But one of the things that I'm impressed by and struck by is I met you so long ago, and you seem to have just always been on your own path.
Yeah.
You've not been sort of out there making a lot of noise,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yet I have seen your name in international publications,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I've seen you just quietly, sort of in a stealthy way,
Yeah.
sort of behind the scenes, underground way, just kind of
Yeah.
making your moves. So
Yeah.
is there anything you'd want to, along with what you just said about just generally, for
Yeah.
young black folks?
Yeah, so I think for me, I realized that I didn't want to necessarily play the fashion game, or there's just certain things that I didn't feel like I had the means to do, whether it was like paying for specific publications or just kind of like playing the fashion game of like paying for fashion shows. So I think for me, it was just really about finding where I could fit in, and a lot of the things I didn't want to do, I just didn't care to do it, and I just kind of, like you said, kind of just was stealthy about it and did it my own way. But yeah, I think now more than ever, you see a lot of examples of people doing their own thing. So I think as a designer that's black or of color, like, yes, if you want to play that game where you're like doing the whole fashion shows and kind of like playing the fashion game or following the fashion formula, you can do that. You also don't have to do that, and you'll be totally fine. I think there's not only me, but a lot of other people that are an example of that. So I would definitely say, yeah, just play your own game. Like at the end of the day, play your own game and do what works for you. Do what you can afford, and like figure out things within like your means, you know, and you should be fine as long as, you know, ultimately the product is good. You can be like, look at people like Alexander McQueen, right? As long as the clothes are good, like you'll get to where you're supposed to be.
You know, you made me remember how both Margiela and McQueen for years didn't want to be photographed. Remember that when they first
Yeah.
started? Even though I still don't know if I know what Margiela looks like.
Exactly, yeah.
But McQueen eventually came forward. But just even that initial,
Yeah.
you know, everybody else was, no, you got to be branded, you got to be your
Yeah.
brand, and they were like, no, I don't care. You know, you don't need to. And Marjorie to this day,
Yeah, 100%.
it's always the product that you kind of stand
Yeah,
with,
100%,
right?
yeah.
And he's even doing so many collaborations now, and even other people designing for him. So, and you know, what you just said resonated for me about what it means if you've been left outside the system
Yeah.
in terms of historically what has happened to marginalized folks, black folks, but also as people from the African continent who, you know, have so much, I would say,
Sorry, just gonna move here.
yeah, so much ahead of the game because we are the original peoples, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So there's so much that I think, you know, folks like you are bringing to the game, which are really just inspiring, just leaning into who we are and have been and are able to be, and not having to play the game of the mainstream, like actually figure out that different avenue that can actually position us to actually be even more successful, frankly. So I think
100%.
that's a great message,
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
you know? And I don't know that you were so conscious about it. I think you're just doing it because this is who you are,
Yeah, 100%. I don't.
you know?
Yeah, I just, like you said, just doing my thing.
Yeah.
I think that's all that really matters. Like, do your thing, and like, hopefully, I'm just grateful that people have gravitated to what I'm doing,
Right.
and people relate to what I'm doing, and people, like, you know, like yourself, like, deem that my work is worthy of their hard-earned cash, and they're gonna take time to talk about me and share my work, right? And I think, obviously, it could have went a bunch of other ways, but we're where we are now. So yeah, I think it's definitely something that I'm super grateful about. But I think that was a big thing, like just taking the risk and being like, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I think is the right thing to do, not because I read like some report on, you know, business or whatever. I just followed my gut. And obviously when I first started, it was something that went over a lot of people's heads. It was kind of like hard to understand, but I think I just kind of saw where we were heading to, especially as a people. So who knows? Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank
Well,
you.
you know, thank you.
Yeah, of
And
course, no worries.
All the best.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Take
no
good care.
worries.
Thank
All
you.
right. Later.